Week, the Gaza Health Ministry announced that the death toll from Israel's ground offensive had surpassed 30,000 since the 7th of October. On Thursday, the Hamas-run Health Ministry also reported that Israeli forces shot and ran over more than 100 civilians who were attempting to access a humanitarian aid convoy. Meanwhile, South Africa yesterday stated that the bloodbath on Thursday shows that Tel Aviv continues to violate the International Court of Justice interim orders to take steps to prevent killings and to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza. Now, for more on this conversation, we're now joined by Rina King, who's a member of South African Jews for a Free Palestine. Rina, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It just seems like it's getting worse, isn't it?
Thanks very much for having us, Martha. It's just getting worse. It's just horrendous. We're reeling from that, the news of 112 people killed and over 700 people injured from just trying to get flour because more than 300,000 people are starving in northern Gaza, with people dying of starvation. People dying of starvation, it's a preventable activity. 13 children at least have died of starvation. And it's basically because Israel is stopping aid from getting into northern Gaza. It's just unconscionable. And as we're reeling from that, so we hear 2 hours ago, Israel has bombed a tented camp outside Emirati hospital, maternity hospital in Rafah in southern Gaza, with at least so far reported 11 people killed and over 50 people injured. You know, Israel was told not to traumatize the people of Palestine, of Gaza, in the provisional ICJ hearing. And I cannot imagine what it's like to be part of that, to be living under those circumstances in Gaza. It's just unimaginable. It seems like in the north, 8 trucks were going in, and Israel has been targeting the police force in Gaza. So there's a breakdown of law and order. They're not allowing people the UNRWA people also to manage these shipments. So the UN Palestinian support people are also being targeted, and they cannot manage the shipments. They are trying to get families. They're phoning individual families to try and manage the shipment. Israel is trying to make gangs in Gaza to manage Gaza. It's just unconscionable what they are doing. So these trucks arrive, and because the law and order people are being targeted specifically, they're not present. And people rush at the trucks. And then Israel shoots them from tanks. Now, Israel says that most of them were run down by the trucks.
Yes.
But that's not what the hospitals say. The hospitals say that most of the injured people that came in from bullet wounds, from shrapnel, and from fire from the Israeli occupying force.
You know, Rina, it just seems as though the situation right now, if you even bother to try and sustain yourself and keep yourself alive by going to one of those humanitarian trucks, you could be actually taking yourself to the lion's den. So it's a catch-22 between starving to death and going to a truck for humanitarian aid and perhaps then being shot.
Exactly. I mean, it's inhumane. And you cannot understand how anybody supports this. You know, Biden says his pithy stuff like, they shouldn't target the police force in Gaza and things like that. And we really need more definitive justice from the International Court of Justice, because Israel has not listened. You know, Israel has not listened to international law for 75 years. It hasn't listened since the occupation, since the taking over of the West Bank. It hasn't listened to international law, which has said that Gaza and the Palestinians need to be self-governing. And it doesn't listen. There is no sense of humanity. They have violated every single humanitarian law that we know of, plus done acts that the humanitarian law doesn't even cover, because who would have ever thought that somebody would kill a person looking for food?
Mm. Speaking of definitive justice, you know, in terms of the ICJ's provisional orders from earlier this year, it was clear what Israel had to do, you know, to take measures not only to prevent acts of genocide, but also to ensure humanitarian aid is received by Palestinian civilians. Now, from this conversation, and of course many observers such as yourself and media reports and organizations like Human Rights Watch have noted that not only are they not adhering to these strict guidelines by the ICJ as well, but also these humanitarian aid trucks have lessened. We're seeing less and less of them coming in to provide that aid that is so desperately needed.
There's less and less. I mean, again, America airdropped 38,000 meals. You know, in the face of 300,000 people starving, 38,000. So the aid trucks have lessened. Israel is obstructing them because there are kilometers of trucks waiting to get into Gaza. Israel is obstructing them. And the other day also, Israel bombed a truck. They didn't injure anybody, but they destroyed all the food on an aid truck. They bombed food in Gaza, destroying the food. It's just inhumane. You cannot even begin to understand it.
And what kind of aid are we talking about here? You know, what is in these trucks? Because you mentioned earlier, you know, it's a bit of flour here and there, but what kind of, I mean, it doesn't sound like a quality sort of life. Of course, it wouldn't be in terms of a war, but in terms of this kind of aid that's coming in, it's medical aid, and what kind of food is it that they're just trying to get scraps of?
Yeah, it's water sometimes, potable water, it's flour, it's beans, it's basic food that people are desperately in need of to stay alive, literally to stay alive. You see pictures of people is the same as pictures of people from concentration camps. And yet, I mean, Israelis, for one, they do not see these pictures because they do not look, and their news stations do not broadcast it. And then they say, well, it's all Hamas's fault. Hamas is stealing the food. I mean, really, Hamas is stealing the food. If Hamas was stealing the food, why aren't they targeting those people stealing the food? They have all these stupid excuses that they lie about as to why ordinary people, children, are not getting food, and they are expressly starving these people, as they said they would from the beginning of the war. Ben Gvir actually praised the soldiers that shot at the people getting aid, where they killed 112 people and injured more than 700.
Rina, before I let you go, now we're sitting at over 30,000 Palestinians who've been killed and counting. The South African government has done what it could by taking the matter all the way to The Hague. We've condemned also this recent attack as well with the 112 and over 700 who were injured for merely just trying to get humanitarian aid. We've seen a number of countries globally also pledging solidarity and taking the route that South Africa has taken. But what more needs to be done?
Well, we need to engage in boycott, divestment and sanctions of Israel. We need to stop them from going to the Olympic Games. We need to stop supporting companies like Hewlett-Packard who support the genocide and support the apartheid in Israel. We need to stop supporting American products where American profits go towards feeding the Gaza war, the bombs on Gaza. We need to stop supporting anybody who supports Israel and get the country to stop importing any Israeli products and embark on boycotts and divestment and sanctions. All the banks should not be transferring any money to Israel, and it should be put onto the people of South Africa to start engaging in this way to pressure Israel, the same as other countries pressured South Africa to change to a democracy. So we need to pressure Israel to change to a democracy, and definitely Israel should not participate in the Olympic Games.
Well, Rina, thank you so much for joining us.